the topic of our study today will be Genesis chapter 32. Overcomers like Jacob get a new name. In chapter 31, we remember that Jacob and Laban had a heated argument that ended in a peace agreement with Jacob leaving after having served Laban for 20 years. Now Jacob is heading back home with his wives, his children, his livestock, and while he's on his way home, he's going to run into his long-lost brother Esau. And you can remember that Esau planned to kill Jacob before he left. And so the question, the tension that's going to be here is, will Esau still want to kill Jacob, or will they be reconciled to one another? And besides all of that dramatic stuff happening, there are also some very interesting things that will happen in this chapter. Jacob will meet a group of angels that were watching over him. He will make the overcomer prayer, is what I like to call it. He will even wrestle with God himself and get a new name. God's going to change his name from Jacob to Israel in this chapter. And one of the lessons that we can see here is that if we want God to give us a new name, we're going to see that there's a blueprint on how we do that in this chapter. So let's get into the word. Verse 1 of Genesis chapter 32, and Jacob went on his way, and the angels of God met him. Think about that. Jacob was, chosen for a special purpose, and God's angels were there all along. But Jacob, didn't see that they were there. His 20 years that he was serving Laban, they were there, but he couldn't see them. But now, all of a sudden, he's on his journey back home, and God shows him this view or this vision of these angels. And this must have been a spectacular thing. Today, many people see different things like unidentified flying objects and things like that. Well, I have no doubt at times God's angels God's angels and Satan's angels are classified as being in or themselves as being themselves unidentified flying objects. So I don't know exactly what he saw. Did he, how he saw these angels, if they were in any kind of vehicles or if he just saw them in the sky. We don't know. Verse 2, and when Jacob saw them, I bring that up because in the book of Ezekiel, God's angels, his angelic hosts, actually they land on earth in these metallic, fiery vehicles that many people say are, what people would consider to be UFOs today. That'll be another topic. Actually, we might even do a book like Ezekiel after this book is done. We'll see. That'd be kind of fun. All right. So he calls, and Jacob saw them and said, "This is God's host." And host is like an army, right? And he called the name of that place Mahanaim. Now this Mahanaim means the two hosts. And no doubt he's referring both to his entourage, Jacob's entourage on earth, which was God's chosen nation, as well as the angels working together for the purposes of God, okay? Two hosts, angelic hosts and an earthly host. We have that even today. God has an army up in heaven, and he's got an army on earth today that we're a part of doing his work. Sometimes I wonder, man, what would it look like if we could see into this heavenly dimension? Like if you could just look out now. Would we see angels around the house now? It's amazing stuff to think about. Verse 3, and Jacob sent messengers before him to Esau, his brother, unto the land of Seir, the country of Edom. Okay, he sent in messengers out. That's how they did things back then. He's part of the main body, but he's going to send out some swift messengers to go get the communication line going here. And he commanded them, saying, Thus shalt thou speak unto my lord Esau, thy servant Jacob saith, I have sojourned with Laban and stayed there until now. So he's letting Esau know where he's been all these years through his messenger. Verse 5, I have oxen and asses, flocks and men servants and women servants, and I have sent to tell my Lord that I might find grace in thy sight. In other words, I've become blessed. I have all these servants now that are a part of my family or entourage, so to speak. And he's hoping that, he's asking that he'll find grace in his sight, okay? Because remember, again, Esau was pretty mad about losing the birthright and the blessing. And he wanted to kill Jacob. Now Jacob is trying to be friendly with him here. Verse 6, and the messengers returned to Jacob, saying, we came to thy brother Esau, and also he cometh to meet thee. Now check this out. And 400 men with him. So this doesn't look good for Jacob. I mean, it looks like, a little war party coming out after him. And we're going to see what's going to happen here. Then Jacob, verse 7, then Jacob was greatly afraid and distressed. And he divided the people that was with him, and the flocks, and the herds, and the camels into 2 bands. Okay, it's okay to be scared or afraid at times. The sin is when you allow your fear to cause you to disobey God. Or you allow, let's say, take for example the Israelites when they were commanded to go and take the land of Canaan. It wasn't their fear that was the sin, it was that they allowed their fear to make them not go in and conquer the promised land. Okay, so fear or being afraid is a natural feeling, it's just how you deal with it. All right, so he divides his company into, notice he's taking immediate action here. He's dividing, he's preparing for the worst here. He starts dividing his people into 2 bands. Verse 8, and said, if Esau come to one company and smite it, then the other company which is left shall escape. All right, so he's taking the necessary measures to protect his family and his livestock. And what we're seeing here, he's preparing for the worst, and he's going to pray for the best. And we should do the same. We need to look at this as an example, as Jacob's actions as an example in our lives. So many people think that we should just sit back and let God handle it all. I'm waiting for God to talk to me today. Okay, I'm not going to move until He tells me. No, Jacob first all of a sudden went into immediate action, and he is going to pray. Now, it would be wrong just to take action on your own and not consult God. But it's also just as wrong to sit back and do nothing and wait for God to try to tell you your every move. That's silly. And we see that. I mean, I've seen that with people I know that, it's like they live in a pretend world. They're waiting for God's voice to talk to them. When they get up in the morning, it's like, okay, do I want red bubble gum or blue bubble gum? Or something that silly. Anyways, so it's not sacrilegious to make our own preparations in an emergency situation. It's called common sense. These other people, I'm just kind of hammering this one down. Other people will say that this is a bad thing that Jacob's doing because they'll say, well, we should just trust in the Lord. I mean, we should just, rely upon Him, that He'll, we shouldn't take any kind of action on our part because it shows doubt or lack of faith. But no, that's not the case here. All right. I will say this. I'll say one more thing. If you have children, like God has children, we're His children, right? Do you want your kids sitting on the couch waiting for you to tell them everything to do? That would be pretty silly. You'd say, okay, do what you can, and then when you run into trouble and you need help, then come and I'll help you. I'll give you assistance. So, and we think somehow that God, a lot of these people think that God's somehow different than that. Does He really want a bunch of servants down here, laying around waiting for His instructions for everything? That would be ridiculous. All right, moving on. Verse 9, and Jacob said, O God of my father Abraham, the God of my father Isaac, the Lord which saidest unto me, return unto thy country and to thy kindred, and I will deal well with thee. Now notice he starts out his prayer. He's in a bad situation here. He thinks his family's going to get attacked and many people are going to be killed. But he starts out his prayer first by reminding God of His promise. And this isn't a bad thing for him to do. God likes, when you remind God of his promise, it shows that you actually believe his promise. It's not done in a way where he's mad at God and saying, God, what's going on here? Esau's coming after me and you promised me. It's not like that. He's just gently reminding God as he opens up his prayer. He says, God, I'm doing what you told me to do. And you told me to go back to my country and you said you would be with me. Okay. Verse 10, now check this out, important part. This is actually what I would call the overcomer's prayer. He starts out first reminding God of his promise. Now he says, now we're going to see a little humbleness in him. I am not worthy of the least of all thy mercies and of all the truth which thou hast showed unto thy servant. For with my staff I have passed over the Jordan, and I am become two bands. Okay, he says, I passed over the Jordan here, but now I'm having to break up into two bands. It's not looking good. He said, but the important part is, he says, I am not worthy of the least of all thy mercies. This is basically when people become a Christian, they have to have that mindset at conversion. This is what causes somebody to become a real Christian, is when they say, Lord, I'm a sinner. I don't deserve your forgiveness or your truth, but I'm still asking you for it, right? And so that's no doubt why Jacob was there. There's no doubt that this is one of the reasons why God chose Jacob as his chosen servant here, because he's humbling himself before God. Now it's interesting. A couple hundred years later, Jacob's descendants will actually cross over this same river, the River Jordan, into the Promised Land. And why are we seeing this happen? Basically 200 years beforehand. I mean, there must be some divine significance in this pattern that we're seeing happen here, because Jacob's going to cross over. He's going to be facing a threat, the threat of death or threat of war with Esau. Well, when the Israelites crossed over Jordan, what did they have to do to get to the Promised Land? They had to face threats of war and death. So I don't know why God did it this way, but I just wanted to point it out that what Jacob did here was very similar to what his descendants would have to do 200 years later. Now think about this. After they were delivered from the bondage of Egypt, now where is Jacob coming from? In all practical purposes, he's coming from the bondage of Laban. Okay? Both were servants. Both were slaves, so to speak, and they were being set free to go conquer the land. And Jacob actually does it right here by humbling himself in prayer and asking for help. Okay, so let's move on. Verse 11, another part of the prayer. He goes from reminding God of his promise to humbling himself and asking for mercy. Now he asks for deliverance from his enemies. He says, deliver me, I pray thee, from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau, for I fear him, lest he will come and smite me and the mother with the children. It's interesting here. Esau was his own brother, but Jacob feared that his own brother was going to kill him. There's also a parallel for Christians in the end times. You might make a note of Mark chapter 13, verses 12 through 13. I'll just quickly read them. Jesus says, now the brother shall betray the brother to death, and the father the son, and the children shall rise up against their parents, and shall cause them to be put to death. And you shall be hated of all men for my name's sake, but he that shall endure unto the end, the same shall be saved. Okay, so Esau we could look at today as a type of the modern day church versus the true biblical church, like Jacob was. Esau was kind of a type of that, and Jacob was a type of the true biblical church. And you see there's this jealousy or hatred of Esau for Jacob, because Jacob truly had the birthrights and the blessings of God. Whereas the fake church today does not truly have the blessings and the birthright of God, but God's elect do. They have it. And they don't like what we do. And there's some animosity. There always has been. All throughout the years, you you study European history, you'll find that the established church would burn true Christians at the stake and, put them in the towers over there in England and things like that. All kinds of Christian persecution. Anyways, verse 12. And thou saidest, I will surely do thee good, and make thy seed as the sand of the sea, which cannot be numbered for multitude. And then he reminds him again, after he prays for deliverance, he says, and you said, God, surely that you would make my seed numerous as the sands of the sands of the sea. So obviously in Jacob's mind here, he's thinking, well, I'm facing a really terrible situation, but I got to be able to make it through past this because and he's speaking out loud to God in prayer saying this, I got to be able to make it through because God promised me that I would. If all my children were killed by Esau, then this promise couldn't come to pass. Now think of all the times think of the times that we are going to face. We're going to face some pretty, trying times. And there might be times where we're going to be thinking, well, the Bible says that we are going to overcome. We're going to see, God's going to see us through this stuff. His angels will be with us, right? And all those types of things. And so we're going to be thinking that, and it could look very bad at times, like we're not going to get through, and it's not going to go our way. But as we're going to see here with Jacob versus Esau, God does make a way for Jacob. But Jacob also had to do his part. We're going to see here. Okay, verse 13, and he lodged there that same night and took of that which came to his hand a present for Esau his brother. Okay, so he's getting a present ready. Verse 14, 200 she-goats and 20 he-goats, 200 ewes and 20 rams, 30 milch camels and their colts, 40 kine and 10 bulls, 20 she-asses and 10 foals. Okay, so basically what we're seeing here, Jacob is getting a present together for Esau worth hundreds of thousands of dollars in our equivalent to our money here today. So as we're going to see here, he's trying to appease his brother. He knows his brother was angry, and he's thinking, if I give him a gift, that may help. And this is wise. Did God tell him to do this? I don't think so. It's not written. Is it a sin for Jacob to do this? No, I think he's using some common sense and using the brain that God gave him to do something about this situation here. Verse 16, and really, I mean, this was a big present he was given to Esau, but it wasn't going to break his bank, He wasn't going to go broke giving him this present. Jacob was a rich man now. Genesis 32, verse 16, and he delivered them into the hand of his servants. Now check this out. It's interesting the way he's going to do this. Every drove by themselves and said unto his servants, pass over before me, and put a space betwixt drove and drove. Now Jacob's using some wisdom here, and perhaps even we see an instance of psychology being used in the Bible. He's not sending this gift in one big lump sum, because he thinks, okay, if I do that, Esau will take it, and then his mood still might not be changed all that much, and it might not be enough to appease his anger. But if I send it step by step with a little space, I give him one piece, and then Esau sees the gift and he says, oh, that was nice, but I'm still pretty mad. All of a sudden another wave comes, and it's like, all right, yeah, he's really okay. And then these waves keep coming, and it's breaking. I think Jacob planned that this would break Esau's anger down a little bit at a time till finally things were, finally they'd be able to meet without any tensions present. So again, this is definitely a psychological trick. I don't even know I don't know if they call this conditioning in the psychology world or what the official term is, but he's definitely using that. All right, moving on. 17. And he commanded the foremost, saying, when Esau my brother meeteth thee, and asketh thee, saying, whose art thou? And whither goest thou? And whose are these before thee? Okay. Then thou shalt say, they be thy servant Jacob's. It is a present sent unto my lord Esau. And behold, also he is behind us. So each wave when they came, they said this same thing, that Jacob's behind us. and he's going to come and meet you. But then another wave would come. So Esau didn't know when Jacob was going to be there. This was also probably a good way for Jacob to test to see if Esau was going to attack him as well. Because if after this first wave came, if Esau thought that Jacob was behind, if Esau was really going to violently try to take Jacob out, he might move right away after that wave comes in because he knows that Jacob's right there. So he's actually even kind of tricking him a little bit here as well. Strategizing. Verse 19. And so he commanded, and so commanded he the second and the third, and all that followed with droves. So there's at least 3 or more droves of this that were bringing these gifts. On this manner shall you speak unto Esau when you find him. Okay. So went, verse 21, so went the present over before him, and himself lodged that night in the company. And he rose up that night and took his 2 wives and his 2 women servants and his 11 sons and passed over the ford Jabbok. And he took them and sent them over the brook and sent over that he had. And Jacob was left alone, and there wrestled a man with him until the breaking of the day. Now it just kind of pops in here as very strange. Jacob's in this, he's really fearing for his life. He's going to face Esau. Esau's got 400 men with him. And all of a sudden he sends his wives over this river and he's by himself. I don't know if he was going to be praying or what he's going to be doing. But then all of a sudden this man appears and wrestles with him all night long. What the heck is going on here? Verse 25, and when he saw that he prevailed not against him, this man, he touched the hollow of his thigh, and the hollow of Jacob's thigh was out of joint as he wrestled with him. So they're wrestling all night. Jacob seems to be getting the better end of the match here. And so then this man, he just touches Jacob's hip, and it goes out of joint. As we're going to see here, this isn't an ordinary man. This is an angel, and maybe even more than that. We'll see here. So, verse 26, and he said, let me go, for the day breaketh. The angel saying this to Jacob, hey, let me go, the day break. And so Jacob is still wrestling with this angel, even though his hip is out of joint. That shows the determination of Jacob. He was not a quitter. He was not a giver-upper. We talked about these Christian leaders that have been committing suicide and things like that lately. That is not the character of Jacob. Jacob would keep going, keep fighting all the way till the end. He wouldn't sit around and feel sorry for himself and think, woe is me, la-di-da-di-da, All right. So even after his hip, and he says, and he said, I will not let thee go except thou bless me. So evidently Jacob figured out that this was not an ordinary man, and he's holding on to this angel, and he's saying, nope, I'm not letting you go until you give me a blessing. And he said unto him, what is thy name? And he said, Jacob. And he said, thy name shall be called no more Jacob, but Israel. For as a prince hast thou power with God and with men, and hast prevailed. So again, this is all of a sudden this weird incident comes in, and this is probably one of the most significant group of passages in the Bible where Jacob's name gets changed to Israel. And then all throughout the rest of the Bible, what's the Bible about? The tribes of Israel. You go all the way to New Heavenly Jerusalem. Whose names are on that city? The children of Israel. And it all started here with this name change, with Jacob wrestling this angel. Obviously, well, I'm going to say this. You see here, Jacob didn't give up. He kept wrestling this angel. The modern church likes to talk a lot about God's grace, but they never, and they talk about, everything, God's done everything for us. Everything was done on the cross and all that, and all we have to do is believe. But think about, did Jacob's name get changed just because he believed? No way. He had to prevail against he had to do something himself. Now, many people get so worked up about this today. You got this battle between these different churches that say, if you do anything, if you do any of your own work, you're taking away from the blood that Jesus paid on the cross. And now you're teaching work salvation and so forth. But this is what happened. God was giving Jacob grace freely with Jacob's prayer, but Jacob, in order to get the reward, to get his name changed, he had to actually do something himself. He had to overcome. So I'll put it this way. The modern church likes to talk a lot about God's grace, but they never talk about how we are supposed to overcome. We never hear that. But we see that in every biblical character. We see that in all of them. But they like to present this fake Christianity to us that is nothing, that's just a few passages here and there to build up this easy pie-in-the-sky Christianity. It's never been like that in the Bible. The modern-day church would probably say something like, well, if an angel came to me and want to wrestle, I wouldn't wrestle him back. That would be too aggressive. I'd probably just say, oh, please don't hurt me. Have you heard about the love of Jesus? Or something like that. And, the bottom line is God cannot use people like that. And that's why we don't see them in the Bible. There are no heroes of the Bible that acted like most of our modern day preachers today. I don't see them. Anyways. All right, so to sum up what we're talking about here a little bit, people who use common sense, take necessary actions, pray, and then persist until victory is achieved are the kinds of people that God uses. Okay? Let me see here. Okay, let's move on. I had more notes there. Oh, I actually should talk a little bit about this. This is probably a spot that we want to focus on, being that our title of the study is The Overcomers Will Get a New Name like Jacob did, right? In Revelation chapter 2, verse 17, I'm just going to read quickly through some verses about us being able to get a new name, similar to how Jacob got a new name. So as you can see here, this ties in. God is actually giving us a secret. I shouldn't say secret. That sounds too mystical. But he's given us a template on how to overcome ourselves, how to get the blessings and the birthrights like Jacob did, and so on. And I'll just read Revelation 2, verse 17, where Jesus says, "He that hath an ear, let him hear what the Spirit saith unto the churches. To him that overcometh." And there's a reason why Jesus says here, "To him that hath an ear, let him hear." Because most of our mainstream Christianity, the mainstream churches, because they don't teach overcoming, it's obvious they don't have eyes to see and ears to hear, because this is the message that Jesus had for the church. And he says, "To him that overcometh I will give to eat of the hidden manna." I guess it is hidden. It says it right here. It's kind of a secret stash of food here. "And I will give him a white stone, and in the stone," stone is, I guess a white stone was commonly used as like a trophy, like a victory stone. "And in the stone a new name written, which no man knoweth, saving he that receiveth it." Now think about it. God is going to give each and every one of us a new name. And it's going to be based off of what we do here now on the earth. Like Jacob, what was his name based off of? What he did. He wrestled with the angel. He did not give up, and he prevailed against him. So God gave him that name based off of his own works. That the modern day church says we can't talk about our own works anymore because that's taking away from God's grace or mercy. And it's not at all. It's actually showing that you actually really appreciate his mercy, because you're motivated to do something about it. And then Revelation 3 verse 12 says, let me see here. 3 verse 11, I'll read this real quick. "Behold, I come quickly, hold that fast which thou hast, that no man take thy crown. He that overcometh I will make a pillar in the temple of my God, and he shall go no more out, and I will write upon him the name of my God, and the name of the city of my God, which is New Jerusalem, which cometh down out of heaven from my God." Now check this out. "And I will write upon him my new name. Okay, my new name. Then you'll find this new names given as a reward in the Old Testament as well, in Isaiah chapter 56, Isaiah 62, and I'm not going to go through all of them, but other than, it's important. There's a couple, I shouldn't say modern day examples, but New Testament examples of people getting their name changed. You had Peter, his name was Simon before, and his name became Peter because he was going to be the rock, or be a part of, help be the founding member of the church, right? And then there was Paul. His name was Saul before God named him Paul. So, and a name is important. You think about it. When you look at in the eternity, when we look at somebody and we call them by their name, it's not going to be a generic name like sometimes we give our kids. It's going to be one based off of your merit. So your name is going to be something very important, something that, again, you have to earn. You have to earn it. It's not going to be freely given to you. When we get to heaven, God's not going to just say, you're all going to be named wonderful, beautiful servants of mine. No, not unless you deserve it. Would you get that name, okay? And it's your name for the eternity. So it's important what we do. We don't want to... It's, when God's talking about giving you a new name, He's not just writing as He's not a poet sitting there saying, I'm saying all these nice fancy things so it just, it makes you want to get to heaven. No, it is a very solid thing that will happen. All right, so Jacob got this wonderful name. I don't know if you could have a better name than this. A prince that rules with God. Prince that rules with God. Verse 29, and Jacob asked him and said, tell me, I pray thee, thy name. Now, I do want to say a couple more things about that, actually. I was just thinking about it. It's really strange that God came down and wrestled with Jacob like this. Even fathers today like to horse around and wrestle with their kids. And I have no doubt that God probably enjoyed that little wrestling match with Jacob. But it wasn't just for his enjoyment, though. He was actually initiating Jacob. He was toughening him up. And remember, Jacob was facing Esau. So no doubt this probably gave Jacob a little bit more courage now. So he's kind of initiating him, or kind of even training him mentally, in a sense, to take on great challenges. All right, anyways, verse 29. And Jacob asked him and said, tell me, I pray thee, thy name. Oh, did I read that?
No.
Okay, sorry. All right. Genesis 32, verse 29, and Jacob asked him and said, tell me, I pray thee, thy name. And he said, wherefore is it that thou dost ask after my name? Now, God always sometimes does it. He doesn't answer directly. He answers a question with a question to make you think about something. And it also says, and it also makes Jacob stop and think, I was just wrestling. Don't you know who I am? And so Jacob now gets it, and he blessed him there. Now check this out. And Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, for I have seen God face to face, and my life is preserved. So now he knew, after he asked him the name, he still thought he was an angel, or he didn't know exactly who this was. But then after he asked him that question, and he got the response he got, then it all clicked in his mind. Oh my gosh, I was just wrestling with God himself. So, anyways, I really do, looking back, I really believe that God expects us to wrestle with Him. Wrestle with Him by, I think of, when you're trying to figure out hard passages in the Bible, it's kind of like a wrestling match. I look at it as a wrestling match with God. When I'm coming across something, I'm like, I need to figure this out, and I don't want to give up. My wife knows that. I'll get on a topic and it drives her crazy. I'm like, no, there's something there, and I'm not stopping until I figure it out. I know there's something there, and it's kind of like trying to take the example of Jacob. I'm going to wrestle with him until I get the blessing of understanding this passage. And there are many different examples of that. You guys have your own experiences in your life. All right, verse 31. And as he passed over Peniel, the sun rose upon him, and he halted upon his thigh. So now after wrestling with God, God probably wanted to leave a little bit of a mark on him to make sure Jacob didn't get the big head thinking he was a big tough guy, he could wrestle and prevail with God. Now Jacob's walking with a limp because of his hip. So God left a little mark on him after that. That he's more powerful than Jacob. Verse 32, therefore the children of Israel eat not of the sinew which shrank, which is upon the hollow of the thigh unto this day, because he touched the hollow of Jacob's thigh in the sinew that shrank. That's kind of strange. I didn't know that the Israelites wouldn't eat that part of the meat on, whether it was be on cattle or whatnot. Some area where the muscle hooks up to the hip joint. Interesting. Okay, anyways, in conclusion, we're not doing too bad here. Probably the most important lesson we can take from this chapter is that we are to persevere with God and overcome, whatever the circumstance is. God is looking for overcomers. He's not looking for crybabies, wimps, and sissy boys or sissy girls, okay? And he gives us, and this whole chapter was a template of just that. I mean, first we must realize, if you remember in the beginning of the chapter, first God showed Jacob that the angels were with him to reassure him that he's got protection. Secondly, we must take our own precautions in emergency situations. Thirdly, we must pray for help. And last of all, we must persevere unto the end. Just like Jacob wrestled with God until the end of the day, the breaking of the day, or to the end of the night, I guess you'd say. But through that period of time. And if we do these things, if we do all these things, we will get a new name similar to Jacob's or whatever fits us, however God sees us, that's how he's going to name us. Now think about that. I mean, it's nothing that should cause us to think that we deserve, certain. I want to be cautious when I say it. However God sees us, he'll name us. Because some people say, I'm awesome, man, so God's going to give me the best name or something like that. Or we still want to be humble. I don't want to leave the wrong impression. But anyways, that's it. Anybody have any questions or comments?
Why can't we? I would love to have an angel come to me and wrestle with me. No, I shouldn't say that.
Yeah.
But I mean, physically, they had such, closeness or closer than what we have here since after Jesus passed. I mean,
right.
even the disciples saw Jesus with his hands.
I know.
I mean, how could you not believe? I mean,
yeah.
They had issues, but I mean, everything was so just right there. And we today, I mean, it's not a physical thing with us. It's all faith, of course.
Right.
But, if an angel came down and started wrestling with me, thank you. I mean, that would build me up.
Yeah, it would.
I mean, physically do it. I wrestle all the time in my head.
Yeah.
With things that I shouldn't do or should do, and
right.
I know he's for real, but I would just like to really have a physical thing. But I guess that we're human.
Maybe you'll have a dream tonight.
But Jacob was human.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And he got to wrestle with God physically.
I think whatever happened, when Jesus said that when he was talking about how we could see a lot of the mysteries of the kingdom. Though those guys got to see different physical manifestations of God, they still didn't see the big spiritual picture like we see. So we're a lot more blessed in that sense, because Jesus said that many prophets and wise men have basically dreamed to see and understand the things that you can, but they couldn't. They only saw this much, whereas you guys see this much. But then he said, blessed, I think it was around those same passages, he said, blessed are those that don't see and believe.
Yeah, I know.
More than those who would see and believe. I can't remember the exact wording of that passage, but yeah, I know. I hear what you're saying, but we are
physically wrestled with God,
mm-hmm.
and won. I mean, not won, but did what he overcame.
Right.
The bulb went off.
No, but you know what I mean? That he overcame. So how can he not be better than me, who I don't know. I mean, what you just had said, you know, that we have more because we don't get to see the physical, that stuff.
Right.
Those Tom-
Yeah, because I mean, Jacob
It has to be stronger, but.
Jacob saw the ladder with the angels going back and
Yeah,
forth.
I mean, goodness, if you saw that,
Right.
wouldn't you be like, oh, I'm ready to take the world on?
Yeah.
Because of Jesus now. That's the difference.
But even
He
after
came
Jesus,
and died for us, and people saw him after he had died.
yeah,
That's
physically.
probably the reason why we don't
Right.
get to wrestle with angels.
Christian Overcomers is brought to you by the tithes and offerings of our listeners. If you would like to support our ministry, please go to ChristianOvercomers.com. God bless you, and thank you for your support.
Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. He is trampling out the vintage where the grapes of wrath are stored. He has loosed the fateful lightning of his terrible sword. His truth is marching on.